How does something so seemingly ordinary transform into the moment that alters everything? What if a single tempestuous night could force you to confront emotions you believed you had permanently buried? Madeline pressed her palms firmly against the vehicle's heating vents, desperately attempting to banish the damp chill that had seeped into her very bones. Outside, rain descended in luminous streams, cutting across the windshield, like tears that simply refused to cease. Her son-in-law, Daniel, maintained his focus on the dark interstate stretching endlessly before them. The road hummed beneath the tires, a low, perpetual sound that occupied the silence suspended between them. It had been many hours since they departed from the memorial garden, the final destination of a long, painful journey neither of them had wished to undertake. Sarah's memorial service had concluded. The floral arrangements were already beginning to wilt. The mourners had returned to their separate lives, but grief, it appeared, had accompanied them, settling heavily in the rear of the vehicle like an uninvited companion. The windshield wipers scraped rhythmically, and Madeline observed the reflection of the dashboard illumination dancing across Daniel's profile. He appeared significantly older than his 37 years. The sleepless nights, the remorse, the anguish, they had carved themselves into his features. He had spoken minimally since the ceremony, and she had not pressed him for conversation. What words could possibly provide comfort now? When the storm intensified dramatically, Daniel reduced their speed. "We should find somewhere to stop," he murmured quietly. "The visibility is becoming dangerous." Madeline nodded her agreement. She offered no resistance. The profound ache in her chest had long since replaced rational thought. They exited the interstate and discovered a modest roadside, the sort of establishment travelers selected when they desired to vanish quietly into the anonymity of night. A flickering neon scheme glowed above the entrance. Vacancy. Inside, the lobby carried the faint aroma of stale coffee and rain-dampened carpeting. The receptionist, a weary-appearing woman wearing reading glasses, typed information into her computer system. "We are nearly at capacity," she said apologetically. "Only a single room remains available. It has 2 beds. Daniel looked toward Madeline questioningly. She offered a faint nod of acceptance. "That will be fine," she whispered. The room was unremarkable. Beige walls, creaking floorboards, 2 neatly arranged beds separated by a small lamp table, a faded landscape painting of mountains hung above one headboard. Madeline set down her small overnight bag and seated herself carefully on the bed position nearest the window. Daniel draped his jacket over the room's single chair and activated the heating unit. For an extended period, the only audible sound was rain tapping persistently against the glass. Then, unexpectedly, Daniel's voice fractured the silence. "She loved evenings like this." Madeline turned, startled by the sudden words. "Sarah," he continued, nodding slowly. "She used to say that thunderstorms made her feel protected as though the world was cleansing itself." The word struck Madeline like a gradual wave. She blinked rapidly against gathering tears and managed a weak smile. "She expressed that same sentiment when she was young," Madeline replied softly. She would position herself by the window and count the seconds between the lightning and the thunder that followed. Daniel released a gentle laugh, the first genuine sound of life she had heard from him in weeks. "She insisted I do that, with her even last year. We were visiting friends in the mountains and it rained throughout the entire night. She prepared hot chocolate, insisted I join her on the porch, and said, 'You must experience the storm, Mad, not hide from it.'" Madeline's throat constricted painfully. "That sounds exactly like her." For the first time in months, they laughed quietly through the overwhelming heaviness. It was fragile like spun glass, but it was something. Then the silence returned. Not uncomfortable, but profound, the sort that exists between 2 people who have lost the same beloved person in different ways. Madeline stared at the window. The reflection of Daniel's face hovered beside hers in the dark glass. Both pale, both exhausted, both haunted by absence. She experienced a strange comfort in that shared reflection. They were 2 fractured halves of the same tragic story, bound together by the memory of a woman who had loved them both completely. After some time, Daniel sat on the edge of his bed and ran both hands through his disheveled hair. "Do you ever feel angry?" he asked quietly. The question caught her unprepared. "At her?" she asked uncertainly. He shook his head. At existence itself? At yourself? At the way everything unfolded? She hesitated, then nodded. Every single day, he looked downward at his hands. I keep revisiting that morning. I told her I would repair the breaks the following week, but that week never arrived. Daniel, Madeline whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. You cannot. I should have addressed it sooner, he said, the words shattering like fragile glass. If I had, then perhaps. Madeline stood and crossed to him before he could complete the thought. Stop, she said softly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Do not carry that burden. Sarah would not want you torturing yourself. He looked up at her then, eyes glistening with unshed tears, his voice barely audible. How does one stop carrying something that lives permanently inside you? Madeline had no answer. She only understood that her own guilt resided in her chest as well, the regret of every mother who could not protect her child from the cruelties of the world. She squeezed his shoulder gently. You learned to live beside it, she said quietly, not beneath it. He nodded, blinking forcefully against the tears. When she returned to her bed, the digital clock displayed 11:42. The rain softened into a steady whisper. Madeline switched off the bedside lamp. The room descended into quiet darkness, filled only by the gentle hum of the heating unit. She lay awake, staring at the textured ceiling, listening to Daniel's slow, uneven breathing. Her heart ached for him, not with pity, but with something deeper and more complex. He had been her daughter's husband, certainly, but he was also the final living piece of Sarah that remained to her. And somehow that realization made the room feel considerably smaller. Minutes passed, perhaps hours. Madeline drifted in and out of half-conscious states, her mind cycling between memory and exhaustion. When thunder rolled again, Daniel stirred restlessly. She heard him whisper, half to himself, half to the darkness. She used to sing softly during storms, said it kept the lightning at bay. Madeline turned her head on the pillow. She learned that from me, she said quietly. For a moment their eyes met across the faint light that filtered through the curtains, and something shifted, unspoken and indescribable. A strange tenderness born not from romantic attraction, but from shared devastation. It was not desire. It was not romance. It was something raw and primal. The aching need to not feel utterly alone in the world anymore. Madeline looked away first. She forced herself to close her eyes, but her heart refused to settle. It beat louder with every passing second, as though reminding her she was still alive. Painfully, inconveniently alive. She thought of Sarah, then her laughter, her vitality, her warmth, and how both she and Daniel now floated like specters around the memory of her. Next time Madeline opened her eyes, dawn had quietly arrived. A pale blue light filled the room, painting Daniel's sleeping face in gentle shadow. He appeared peaceful for once, the harsh lines of grief temporarily softened. She sat up slowly, watching him. For the first time, she saw him not as her son-in-law, but as a man who had loved her daughter profoundly. A man who had lost everything meaningful and no longer understood how to continue existing. And something inside her fractured, because she understood him completely. The emptiness, the suffocating silence, the desperate wish for something, anything, to feel real again. Her throat tightened painfully. She wanted to wake him to offer some kindness, but she refrained. Instead, she whispered into the still morning air, Sarah, if you can somehow hear me, help him discover his path forward. Help me find mine. Daniel stirred then, half-conscious, his voice thick with sleep. Did you say something? She forced a small smile. Just speaking to her. He smiled faintly. I do that too. They both sat there quietly, watching the morning light gradually spread across the worn carpet. It should have been comforting, but it was not. It only reminded them that time was progressing with or without their consent. Then Daniel stood, stretched his stiff muscles, and said softly, We should resume our journey soon. Madeline nodded, though her chest felt weighted with lead. She did not want to leave this temporary sanctuary. This room had become a strange haven where their grief could exist without judgment, but they packed their few belongings and prepared to depart. In the parking area, rain misted gently. Daniel loaded their bags while Madeline stood beside the vehicle, staring at the gray morning sky. Madeline, he said quietly. She turned. Thank you. For what? She asked, genuinely confused. For everything, he said, turning to face her fully. For talking. For listening, for being present when I could barely breathe. Her throat constricted. "You do not need to thank me, Daniel. We both required someone who understood." He nodded slowly, then hesitated. "Still, I do not think I would have survived this week without you." She looked at him, then truly looked at the exhausted eyes, the quiet sadness, and the gentleness she had not expected to encounter again at this stage of her life. "You are stronger than you realize," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "You told me that once before. I meant it." They stood there several seconds longer, neither moving, neither wanting the moment to end. Then, finally, Madeline opened the passenger door and settled inside. The autumn wind brushed her face, cool and calm. Daniel followed, retrieving her bag from the trunk. She reached for it, their hands brushing one final time. "Take care of yourself," she said gently. "You as well," he replied. For an extended moment they stood there, eyes locked, not as family, not as strangers, but as two souls who had shared something neither could adequately explain. Then slowly Daniel stepped back. "I will see you again soon." She nodded. "You know where to find me?" He smiled softly and turned toward his vehicle. Madeline watched him drive away until the road curved and his car disappeared from view. And then, for the first time in days, she was truly alone. Inside her house, everything remained exactly as it had been. The framed photographs, the half-read book on the table, the faint scent of jasmine that Sarah had loved. Madeline walked through each room quietly, touching familiar furniture as though greeting old ghosts. When she reached Sarah's bedroom, she paused. Sunlight poured across the bed, illuminating the soft cream-colored sheets. On the dresser sat a small wooden box filled with folded notes, Sarah's keepsakes. Inside, one note caught her attention. It was addressed to Mom. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. "Mom, if you are reading this, it means I did not get the chance to express it again. Thank you for every moment you believed in me, especially when I did not believe in myself. Please do not spend your remaining life missing me. Live for me. Smile again. Find peace even if it feels wrong initially. I want you to embrace the world the way I loved you." Tears blurred Madeline's vision. Her fingers brushed the words as though they could somehow resurrect her daughter. She sat on the bed holding the note close to her heart. For an extended time, she did not move. The house was silent except for the whisper of wind through the partially open window. And then softly she whispered, "I am trying, Sarah. I promise I am trying." That night, she could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face, his sadness, his warmth, the way he had said goodbye as though it caused him pain as well. The following morning, she prepared coffee and stood by the kitchen window. Outside, the world continued its relentless motion, cars passing, children cycling, people laughing along the street. Life persisted as it always had, but her heart felt suspended somewhere between yesterday and tomorrow. Then her phone vibrated. A message from Daniel. "Good morning, Madeline. Just wanted to confirm you arrived home safely." She smiled faintly, typing her response. "I did, and you, Daniel. Safe, but the house feels unbearably empty. I suppose we are both returning to quiet again." Madeline's fingers hovered above the keyboard. She wanted to write something comforting, something light and encouraging, but the truth was, she missed him. She missed the extended conversations, the shared silences, the strange peace that emerged from being with someone who understood her pain intimately. She finally typed, "It is strange, is it not? How silence feels so much louder when you have had someone to share it with." There was a pause, then his reply appeared. "Perhaps silence is not the actual problem. Perhaps it is that certain people begin to matter when you least anticipate it." Her heart stumbled. She set the phone down, staring out the window as rain began falling again. Soft, steady, familiar. The subsequent days passed in slow rhythm. She cleaned, cooked, attempted to distract herself, but everything reminded her of that journey. The rain, the coffee, the motel lamp, the way Daniel had looked at her across the dim light. One evening, while sorting old photographs, she discovered one of Sarah and Daniel together. They appeared so happy. Sunlit faces, arms around each other, the picture of forever. Madeline smiled sadly, tracing her daughter's face with her thumb. Then she noticed something else. Daniel's hand resting protectively on Sarah's shoulder, his gaze soft and full of devotion. It was the same way he had looked at her that final night. Her chest tightened. "Oh, Daniel," she whispered. "What are we doing?" Days transformed into a week. Then one afternoon there was an unexpected knock at her door. Madeline opened it and froze. Daniel stood there, rain-soaked, a hesitant smile on his lips. "Hello," he said quietly. Her voice caught. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" "I honestly do not know," he admitted, running a hand through his damp hair. "I was driving past, and I simply could not continue." "You should not have come," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I know," he said, eyes filled with guilt and longing simultaneously. "But I could not stop thinking about you, about everything we said, everything we did not say." Madeline's heart raced. The rain tapped against the porch roof like a heartbeat. "Daniel, this is not right." "Perhaps not," he interrupted gently. "Or perhaps it is simply two broken people attempting to remember what it feels like to be alive." Tears filled her eyes. "We both love the same person, Daniel. That is what binds us, not this." "I know," he said, "but what if that love is the reason we discovered each other again?" She shook her head, stepping backward. "Do not say that." "I apologize," he whispered. "I simply had to see you one more time." For an extended moment they stood there, the rain falling harder, the world blurring around them. Madeline could feel her heart beating too rapidly, too loudly, too loudly. She wanted to tell him to leave, and she wanted to ask him to stay. Finally, she whispered, "You should go, Daniel." He nodded slowly. "I will. But if you ever need someone to talk to, you know I will be there." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. He hesitated, then turned and walked back into the rain. Madeline watched until his figure disappeared into the mist. Her chest felt hollow, but inside that emptiness was something else, something fragile and precious, like hope beginning to take root. She stepped outside, the rain cool against her skin, the world gray and quiet. Somewhere she imagined Sarah smiling, not in sadness, but in understanding. Madeline closed her eyes and whispered, "Perhaps this is what healing actually looks like. Messy, confusing, but still alive." The wind brushed her hair, carrying the faint scent of rain and distant thunder, and as she turned to return inside, her phone vibrated again. "Daniel, here. I forgot to mention, I discovered something of hers. I believe you should see it." Madeline froze, staring at the screen. She typed back, "What is it?" There was a pause. Then his reply appeared. "A letter, but it is addressed to both of us." The world seemed to pause for a moment. The sound of rain faded, the air thick with something she could not name. She gripped the phone tightly, her heart pounding. What could Sarah possibly have written to both of them? Madeline took a deep breath, staring out into the endless rain. And just like that, she understood their story was not finished yet.